Sometime. The most powerful voice you will ever use is your silence. There comes a point in life when reacting doesn't serve us anymore. You see, in this noisy world, people often mistake noise for strength. But silence has the power to pierce through chaos, shake egos, and protect your peace. Let me ask you this. Have you ever walked away from an argument not because you didn't have something to say, but because you had everything to protect? Your peace, your energy, your sanity. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. You are not obligated to attend every argument you're invited to. That one sentence can change the entire way you navigate your peace in this world. Life is full of people who will provoke you, misunderstand you, misinterpret your words, and even manipulate your intentions. But not every moment requires you to explain, defend, or argue. There is great power in the ability to simply remain still, to choose silence over reaction. That silence, my friend, is not weakness, it's wisdom. Imagine someone walking through a crowded marketplace. People bump into them. Some shout over prices, others complain, a few even insult. Now imagine that same person decides to respond to every insult, every push, every random opinion thrown their way. They'd never reach their destination. They'd be stuck in the chaos, tangled in noise, and lost in the emotion of every passerby's drama. That's exactly what happens in life. If you choose to react to every negative word or toxic action, you lose your way, your clarity, your purpose. You see, energy is a limited resource. Just like the fuel in your car, you only have so much of it to spend in a day. Where you spend it determines where your life will move. If you spend your energy trying to correct every toxic person, arguing every time you're misunderstood, or trying to prove your worth to those who are committed to not seeing it, you're wasting your spiritual fuel. And eventually, you'll feel empty, exhausted, and resentful. Think of it like this. If you have a glass full of clean water, would you pour it into a gutter just because someone asked? Would you give your most precious, purest part of yourself to a space that only knows how to pollute it? That's exactly what happens when we speak into toxic situations. Your words are valuable. Your peace is sacred. When you engage in a battle that isn't worthy of your time or heart, you are handing over your calm to chaos. Sometimes in life, you will encounter people who don't want clarity. They want control. They're not interested in healing, but in hurting. They are not looking for mutual understanding, but for domination. These are the moments where silence becomes your superpower. When you withdraw your energy from that drama, you're not avoiding the situation, you're mastering it. You're saying, I am too focused on growing to be distracted by what does not align with my peace. Now, let me take you to a personal reflection. I once met a young man who had just started working in a very competitive office environment. He was kind, humble, and hardworking, but there was someone on his team who constantly tried to belittle him, mocking him in meetings, twisting his words, creating drama around everything he did. Naturally, he wanted to fight back, to set the record straight, but instead, he decided to remain calm. He kept showing up, kept doing excellent work, and never once reacted to the noise. One day, that toxic colleague's lies were exposed, not by confrontation but by time. You see, truth has a beautiful way of rising to the surface when we remain silent, and allow our actions to speak. That young man taught me something profound. Silence, when chosen with wisdom, becomes louder than any spoken word. It says, I know who I am. I don't need to shout to prove it. People will provoke you when they see you growing. It's almost like your peace threatens their chaos. But your job is not to fix them. Your job is to stay aligned with your highest self. Your silence in these moments is not empty. It's full of grace. It's full of intention. It's saying, I choose to protect my energy over feeding someone else's ego. The power to direct your emotions. You remain the master of your inner world. That's real power, not in shouting louder, but in needing no voice to prove your worth. So the next time someone tries to pull you into a toxic conversation, remember, not every argument deserves a response. Not every insult needs a defense. Not every misunderstanding requires a speech. Sometimes, the greatest strength is in walking away with your head held high and your heart still intact. Silence isn't always comfortable. It takes maturity, patience, and a strong sense of self. But when you learn to protect your peace, you give yourself the permission to grow freely, unburdened by other people's noise. So choose where your energy goes. Choose when to speak and when to be still. Because in a world full of shouting, your silence, grounded in wisdom, will always speak the loudest. When we're hurt, misunderstood, or caught in the middle of a toxic situation, the very first thing we want to do is speak. We want to defend ourselves, explain our intentions, make the other person see our side. It's a natural impulse. But in that very moment, silence is often the strongest and most transformative response we can give. Because silence doesn't mean you're accepting the wrong. It means you're choosing something far greater, peace over pride, reflection over reaction. Silence gives you space. It gives you a pause. And in that pause, something miraculous happens. You begin to see clearly. You begin to hear not just the noise around you, but the voice within you. That voice is calm, wise, and centered. It's not fueled by ego or anger. It's connected to your higher self. But this voice can only be heard in silence. Imagine being in a room full of people arguing loudly. If you try to speak in that moment, your voice will only add to the chaos. No one will hear you clearly. But if you wait, if you breathe, if you let the storm pass, your voice, when finally spoken, will carry a weight far deeper than any words spoken in haste. There's a story of a man who used to get into constant fights with his brother. Every time his brother would say something hurtful or sarcastic, he would instantly respond with more anger. One day, he decided to try something new. He promised himself, this time I will not react. I will simply stay quiet and observe. So, when the argument began again, he didn't speak. He listened. He watched. He allowed the words to come and go like waves. And something unexpected happened. His brother's words lost their power. Without a reaction, the fire didn't spread. Instead, it fizzled out. You see, reactions are like wood in a fire. The more you react, the more you feed the flames. But silence takes the fuel away. It's not passive, it's intentional. You're not withdrawing in weakness. You're rising above in awareness. Sometimes, people will say things just to trigger you. They'll twist your words, bring up the past, or speak from a place of their own pain. And in that moment, if you react, you've handed them your control. But when you choose silence, you are reclaiming your power. You're saying, I don't need to lower myself to explain something you're not ready to understand. Think about it, G. How many times have you said something in the heat of the moment that you later regretted? Words, once spoken, cannot be taken back. And often, when we speak from a place of pain or pride, we end up creating more damage. But silence gives us time to evaluate, to cool down, and to choose our response, not as a reaction, but as a decision rooted in clarity. In our daily life, this practice of choosing silence becomes a tool for emotional mastery. Maybe it's a co-worker who constantly finds faults in your work. Maybe it's a family member who misunderstands your every move. Maybe it's a partner who is angry and bitter because of their own wounds. In each of these moments, you have two choice arcs: speak from emotion or stay silent in wisdom. Silence also creates mystery. When you don't respond immediately, people start to question their own behavior. They begin to reflect on their words. Your silence becomes a mirror, forcing them to face themselves. And that sometimes is more powerful than any lecture or argument. There's a beautiful quote: speak only when your words are more beautiful than your silence. How often do we speak just to fill the silence, just to defend ourselves, or just to be heard? But when we learn the power of restraint, we realize that the space between words can speak volumes. And remember, silence doesn't mean you are suppressing your truth. It means you are protecting your truth until it is ready to be shared with wisdom, not wounded emotion. It means you're choosing healing over harming, peace over proving, and grace over ego. In the end, the loudest voices are not the ones shouting in anger, but the ones silent in strength. The most powerful response is sometimes the one not given. And the most profound growth happens not when we fight every battle, but when we learn which battles are worth our voice and which ones are better left in the stillness of silence. Let your silence be sacred. Let it be your teacher. Let it guide you back to yourself. Because in that space, in that gentle quietness, you will find answers no noise can ever give. Imagine a moment where someone hurls hurtful words at you, tries to provoke you, pokes your insecurities, and waits eagerly for your reaction. But instead of rising to their bait, instead of throwing back your own fire, you simply stay silent, calm, composed, and unmoved. That moment of silence becomes louder than any scream. It's not just a pause. It's a declaration. It's a loud message delivered with no noise at all. Because true power doesn't always roar. It can sit quietly and still shake the world. When someone is trying to trigger you, the expectation is always a reaction. They want to see you flinch. They want to hear your defense. They want to pull you into their drama so they can justify their own chaos. But when you don't give them that satisfaction, you take away their power. Your silence in that moment becomes an invisible mirror. And what's reflected back at them is not your weakness, but their own lack of control. Think about it like this. When a storm hits the ocean, the surface gets rough and wild, but deep down, the water remains calm. That's how silence works in toxic situations. The outer world may be shouting, accusing, creating noise, but your inner stillness stays untouched. And that calm presence can actually cause more discomfort to the one creating the chaos than any words ever could. Why? Because silence forces them to confront themselves. There's a beautiful story of a woman who worked in a very high-pressure office. Her colleague was known for being manipulative and constantly tried to make her look bad in front of their boss. At first, she tried defending herself, explaining her side, even arguing to protect her name. But the more she explained, the more drama the colleague created. One day she decided to stop. She stopped responding. She stopped defending. She let her work speak, and she chose to stay silent in every meeting where accusations were made. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. Over time, her consistency and calm presence made it clear to everyone who the problem was. She didn't win the battle with arguments. She won it with silence. Sometimes, silence speaks the loudest because it communicates emotional control. It says, "I will not stoop to your level. I know who I am." It takes immense to stay quiet when someone is disrespecting you, but that restraint shows the kind of person you've become. It shows growth. You are not ignoring them because you're scared. You're ignoring them because they're not worth your energy. And that's the shift we must make. Stop looking at silence as passive. It's incredibly active. In fact, it requires more internal effort to stay silent than to shout back, to hold back your words, to breathe, to smile, and to say nothing when every part of your ego wants to scream. That's discipline. That's control. That's grace under pressure. In relationships too, we often feel the need to explain ourselves again and again. But sometimes, when someone has already made up their mind about you, nothing you say will matter. In those moments, silence protects your dignity. Because if someone cannot see your heart through your actions, they will never see it through your words. Silence also teaches us self-respect. It's like saying to yourself, "I value my peace more than this argument. I value my time more than proving a point. I value myself more than fighting to be understood by someone who has no interest in understanding me." That's a beautiful place to be. A place of inner strength. A place where your energy is no longer dictated by the chaos around you. And do you know what else silence does? It surprises people. When they expect anger but receive calmness, when they expect a war but get stillness, they don't know what to do. It makes them uncomfortable. It reveals their own intention. That's why silence is so powerful in toxic environments. It exposes without confrontation. It reveals without conflict. There's a saying, "Don't wrestle with pigs. You both get dirty, but the pig likes it." When you choose silence, you're saying, "I won't even step into the mud. I've outgrown it." You rise above not by proving your superiority, but by preserving your purity. Let your silence be your sword and your shield. Let it be your strength. Let it speak for you when words will only be twisted. And trust that in time, the truth always reveals itself. People may not see your heart immediately, but silence has a way of making space for what truly matters to rise. So, the next time you feel that fire inside you telling you to speak, to defend, to fight, pause. Ask yourself, will this help or will it feed the fire? And if the answer is pain, walk away, not in defeat, but in power. Because sometimes the loudest and most powerful thing you'll ever say is nothing at all. Words are powerful, no doubt about it. But words spoken in the middle of a toxic argument often act like gasoline on a fire. Every sentence adds fuel, every reply becomes a spark. Before you know it, a small understanding